in this video, we're going to take a look at working with Linux and some of the basic terminal commands that are necessary to really start being effective at maneuvering through a system. I'm going to use VirtualBox for this. I'm not going to use Proxmox. We have previously created an Ubuntu machine, a Metasploitable machine, and a Linux machine. And I'll just use two of these guys kind of side by side to show a couple different commands. I would like to point out too that if you still are at this initial install and setting for VirtualBox, you can click on Details here, or in the upper right you can click on the little down arrow under Machine Tools and say Details. And this allows to give you a details breakdown of the machine you're currently clicked on. Just kind of a quicker way than going to settings each time. It kind of gives you a quick overview for each device that you click on. So I've got an Ubuntu machine that I previously installed. I'd like to point out that my network is currently offline. I put it on the internal net. And then I'm going to use the Metasploitable as well, who also has the same setting, an internal net. So these guys do not have live internet, nor will they need it for this. And I'm going to click Start for both of them. Click on Metasploitable, Start, click on Ubuntu, Start, and I'll let both of these guys kind of turn on. Oop, I've got some pop-ups here to switch to my scaled mode. And then I'll just minimize this VirtualBox running in the background so we can get started. Okay, so I've got my two virtual machines turned on here. They're on an internal network. They're not going anywhere. They're not going out to the internet. And I'm going to log in using my default credentials that I kind of created. I created a password called password for my Ubuntu machine. And for Metasploitable on the right, you can see it says login with msfadmin is your username, as well as the password, msfadmin as the password as well. So I'm now logged into both my machines. The important thing we're going to take a look at here is how to operate using the terminal, being able to use some commands. You see for something like Metasploitable, that's all you get. You have to be able to learn to be effective operating off of a terminal. There's a lot of times, even when I'm in Ubuntu, if I'm accessing another device or I'm accessing a specific service, you won't have the luxury of a mouse and keyboard. You won't be able to right click and find the option you're looking for. You're going to have to know what are the commands and tools that I have available to me in order to accomplish the objective I'm trying to accomplish. And we're going to start with something simple, some of the basics of just how do I look around and see the files and folders that I have in front of me. When I have a graphical interface, I could click on my files on the left, and I've got things very similar to a Windows directory. If you're familiar with Windows, if Linux is kind of new to you, realize you have things like a documents folder, you have things like a home folder, you have things like a downloads and pictures, and I can start browsing the entire computer. It's kind of like going to your C drive and looking around and seeing all the different folders and files that are already part of this file system. I've got a desktop location and there's nothing on my desktop. So you have a whole bunch of locations already built in from the start with different files and folders, and we can navigate through these using our interface. The question though is, what if I wanted to do all this and I didn't have this interface? How do I then operate? How do I do it then? Okay, so I'm going to kind of minimize this guy. And in the upper left, you can do just a search for something for the terminal. There's a couple different ways you can get to it. I could say terminal, and then there it is. Another way you could get to it is just by right-clicking on the desktop and saying open terminal. But this is something we need to start learning about and saying, hey, what if I only had the terminal? How do I get information out of the computer? How do I start making the changes that I need to change? And then obviously when you see over on the right, this is how the entire Metasploitable machine runs, is just out of the terminal. So obviously using this, it is essential that you learn your terminal commands. Okay. So let's start with one of the basic commands, and that would just be the ls command. Okay. So I'm on the left, I'm just going to type ls. And what ls does is it currently lists the contents of where you are. So you see here I've typed ls, and my current content says, hey, the desktop, the downloads, the music, videos, all these things are now showing up. And so this starts to give us the idea, wait, where am I right now? And when you click back here, you noticed at the home location is where I had things like desktop and downloads and public and templates and videos and all that. So now when I go back over to my terminal, the last guy there on the left, you see I had a lot of that same stuff. So ls is listing our contents. It's a very useful command for seeing what's currently in my directory. If I did this over on the Metasploitable machine, I'm logged in and I type ls. You see I'm currently have different contents. I only have a location called vulnerable, and that's it. Okay, so we're starting to see some of the different defaults that are built into the two different computers, a blank Ubuntu computer as opposed to a Metasploitable computer. One of the next useful commands to kind of go along with this will be, well, if this shows me where I am, where am I to begin with? What if I wanted to explicitly see the location of where I am? This can be accomplished with a PWD, Print Working Directory, PWD, and you see in here, I'm in the home directory for the user that I call just NSA. Okay, so that's currently where I am, and that's why back over here when I had my home directory for NSA, this is the contents of my directory. Okay, so PWD is a useful one to see where I am. What will we get if we do that over here on Metasploitable? If I use the PWD command on Metasploitable, you see they have /home, MSF admin, so this is the home directory for the MSF admin account. So immediately we're seeing some differences on the two accounts. My NSA account on the left that has one contents, my MSF admin account on the Metasploitable machine has completely different contents. So understanding the directories is also very important here. LS and PWD can give you information about these. Okay, so what if I wanted to start navigating around? Usually when I, as we saw here, when I clicked on the file or clicked on the folders, I could click on things like on the desktop and the downloads or music, or even from home. If I've got my traditional pictures here and I wanted to navigate inside, I could do a double click to be able to navigate inside and start going to different locations. Well, how do I do that if I didn't have my mouse and keyboard, if I only had the terminal? And that's accomplished through what's called a CD, change directory. So let's say if I wanted to go to the location, the desktop location, I could do CD space and then start typing out desktop. And after I do CD space desktop, you'll see my location is now changed from my home, which is represented with a tilde, that's my home location, and it now says /desktop. Okay, so I'm now at my /desktop location. Okay, let's see if I did the same thing over here. Remember over here on the right on my Metasploitable machine, all that I had was the vulnerable location. So if I do CD space vulnerable, this allows me to now change into the vulnerable folder, okay, the vulnerable directory. So using CD and LS and PWD, I can start navigating around the file system the same exact way that I would by clicking and double clicking through different folders and then clicking my back arrow, etc. Okay, so I've currently now gone into my desktop location. I saw there was nothing in my desktop. I don't have any files or folders on my desktop. And let's kind of confirm that through the terminal. So if I'm in my desktop and I now do an LS and say enter, what do I get? Well, you see I got nothing. It just immediately came back and said, no, there's no contents. Whereas up above, we saw when we did the LS, we had desktop and documents and downloads. So this is what it would look like when you say, hey, what's inside a directory when the directory is empty? Okay, so we have nothing in here. When I go over to vulnerable and I do an LS, do I have anything inside vulnerable? Oh yeah, I do. It looks like I've got a couple locations inside vulnerable. So we're starting again to see even more differences that are built into these two different computers. So, well, okay, so I've got something inside my desktop here, or excuse me, I'm navigated into my desktop, but I noticed there's nothing inside this location. What if I wanted to make something? Okay, so it's kind of boring just to look and move around. So what happens when I want to start making something? There's a lot of different ways you can make files, so we'll start with a simple touch command. So by doing the touch command, this allows me to create a file. So let's create one called test. Okay, so I'll make a test file and I'll just call it touch, using the touch command. So I type out touch test, and when I hit enter, this is going to create, we'll see in here, I now have a new file on my desktop. Okay, and I can confirm all this again just using the same ls command from before. I did touch tests. I could do ls, and you see, hey, now I've got the test file is now located inside my desktop, okay, which is located inside my home directory, right? So I could do the same thing over here on my vulnerable side. If I wanted to do touch space, maybe I'll call this one test as well, okay, and then do an ls, and we'll see I now have test has now been added to the list of contents inside vulnerable. So we've now taken a look at a couple commands, ls, pwd, cd, and touch. These allow us to start looking around, navigating, seeing where I am, and start creating contents. Okay. Why don't we start taking a little bit more practice with these and see what else I could do with them. Let's say I wanted to go back to my home directory. What's a way that I could start doing that? A couple different ways that we could get there. Let me click on the left guy here. So if I type out my cd command, and do double period, cd dot, that will take me to the location above where I currently am. So you see here I was in my desktop, I did cd dot, and now I went to one location higher. I'm now back to my home directory. Okay, so now when I do my ls, just like before, you'll see I've got the contents of my home directory. When I do pwd, it's the same as before. I'm now at the home directory for NSA. Okay. If I were to take a look from here, I could also, using ls, list contents of a location where I'm not currently in. So let's see what that would be like. So using your ls command, if you end up adding on an option afterwards, so I do ls and then do something like desktop afterwards. You see, this now does not show the contents of where I currently am. It shows the contents of the desktop folder, of the desktop directory. So that's a useful command if I wanted to see contents. You don't have to go navigating to the location in order to see the contents of that location. Okay, you can just use the ls command and then kind of add it on afterwards. All right, so why don't we take this just a couple steps further here and say, all right, I've created this test folder, or excuse me, I've created this test file in the desktop. What if I wanted to destroy it? What if I wanted to get rid of it? Normally, if I had my GUI, I could right-click on it and say remove or delete it, or just hit delete on my keyboard. Let's see how I can do this. So I will navigate to my desktop folder by doing cd desktop. A useful thing in Linux when you're typing things out, if I've typed it out partially, you can start hitting tab, and tab will autocomplete a lot of your options. So I'll start doing this quite a bit, and it saves a lot of your typing. Okay, you just start to type the location and hit tab. So now I'm back to my desktop. I can do a pwd to see, yes, I am actually in my desktop location. When I do my ls again, it shows, hey, there's this test thing in there. What can I do to get rid of this? Well, in Linux, we have the rm command, remove. So I'm going to do rm space and then test. And this would allow me to remove the contents of this file. I'm going to remove the file from my desktop. So when I do an ls again, what am I going to get? There will be nothing, and when I look back over at my folder, you see I've removed the contents over here as well. So why don't I try that on my Metasploitable machine? I'll say I've got my rm space test, and now when I do an ls again, you'll see the test file that I created is gone. Okay. So using some of these basics, we're starting to see how there's a couple different options I could do off of something. We saw I could do ls, I could do ls space and then a location that I wasn't actually in, like desktop. CD allows me to change directory. It's kind of like double clicking into a folder or hitting the back arrow when I do a cd ... and I kind of go up a level. pwd shows me where I currently am. And then touch and rm allows me to simply create a file and then remove a file as well. And this gets us with some of the basics that we're going to need to know and master and do kind of secondhand, just the way that I would if I were in a computer double clicking around folders as well.